Canyon, as we're so used to her seeing, as we wait for the lights to go green here in Boom. And green they go. Van Empel away, just slips a pedal though. Just wonder if she just slipped a gear or something there, getting swallowed up by the pack. But it's Pearson out front and into the first corner first.
Yeah, with Alicia Frank on her wheel and Inge van der Heijden just behind that. Van der Heiden's a super fast starter, and I wouldn't normally see Fem Van Empel make a mistake like that, but she's actually, it's put her right back.
Yeah, work to do for Van Empel after that start. Looked like she just skipped the gear, or maybe just didn't fully engage in the cleat on her pedal, but it's given Petersen an opportunity now. There is Van Empel. She's not that far off, so she's recovered well. Always difficult if you get swallowed up by the traffic early doors in a cyclocross race, but you can see they're often running behind them.
We can see that because it's not the biggest field, that it actually hasn't made a huge amount of difference. And you don't win a cross race in your start, but you can lose it. And if we're going to see a crash here toward, oh yeah, just into the right hand side. That took out Marion Norbert Ribeiro as well. She would be on good form for this.
Yeah, big crash early doors, a massive pile-up. We saw riders heading into that tech zone for bike swaps. That will be due to that crash. Some levers getting knocked about, no doubt. Mechanics will be busy. So we've had very, very cold conditions here in Boom overnight, and we were seeing just before we came live in the last sighting lap, some sections as Sana Kant runs up first of these inclines, we were seeing some riders just testing the ground, looking like it was still frozen in places, Helen. Difficult one to read today.
It definitely looks like where the barriers have been, because these courses are set up a week at least in advance, and so there would have caused shadows on the course, and those shadows are the places where you could just see there Puck Peters' rear wheel sliding out on that corner. They're the sections where you're in the shade that the wheels aren't able to get any traction because they're still frozen on the top.
But Pearson just slid out at the bottom of that little descent there. It's full of really tricky little off-camber banks, this course in Boom, which, as Helen said, some of them lurking in the shadows off those advertiser boardings, which can just make them so hard to predict.
It really can, and in these kind of conditions, where the ground is hard underneath, but as the sun hits some sections, it actually melts a little bit on the top, and then you get this really slick kind of top surface that's only about a centimetre deep. And as soon as you hit the ground underneath, you're getting some traction, but sometimes you don't get the traction, in other places you can. And yeah, you can see these girls are really testing it out, because the sun moves between pre-ride and this, so the sun will actually make a difference on the course from when they last looked at it.
Well, it didn't take her long. Fem Van Empel is back at the front of the race, currently in second wheel behind Puck Petersen. So she's carved through the traffic well.
Betsema just coming through into third spot there in the Power Sales and Bingo team is really quite good in these conditions at following wheels and keeping on these fast courses. So that's why you can see she's making some moves to try and get onto these front two, because she does not want to let those wheels go. It's hard to catch a rider back in cyclocross once they have a big gap.
Yeah, we are of course missing the leader of the Italian Superprestige overall title race, Selin Alvarado, not here this weekend due to illness. Helen, it's a tough, long, old thing, a cyclocross season, isn't it? Everyone can expect to get ill at some stage or another.
It's really tough. The weather conditions are tough.
Just to interrupt you there. Fem Van Empel just topples over at the top of that climb there. I wonder if she's got her bar hooked or something, but it's allowed Petersen to capitalise and get up the road.
Yeah, Peters didn't quite make it over the top, and you see she had to put her foot down. Van Empel was actually stuck on the inside of her, and so are we going to watch it again? You see Fem Van Empel's going up the inside trying to find the grassy section, and just as she gets to... Oh no, actually she didn't actually get close to her. Yeah, she just jumped off and slipped, and that shows how slick this top surface is, that even when you've got your feet down, they don't necessarily get you traction.
Yeah, really deceiving shots here actually. It often looks dry in sections, but they're still frozen. This is a section that we saw in practice was still frozen earlier on this morning.
These riders have spikes in their shoes, so at the very front of their shoes you can buy different ones. You can buy ice ones which are more flat, like little blades, and you can buy ones which look much more like football studs. And so these riders should have the option of getting grip, but I mean, you can see here that there's still frost on the ground on this downhill section, and that makes it really, really tricky to ride and to run sections like this.
Absolutely lethal down there, fully in the shade. Really, really difficult to cope with on these thinner cyclocross tyres. Helen, tell us, tyre choice, just as we're mentioning it, what would you be expecting to see out there today?
Today would be a really tricky one because the topsoil could be slick. There are sections of mud like this that we're looking at Puck Peters is now, and there are sections that are really, really slick. So when it's icy, you actually want the most contact with the ground from your tyre. So you run a tyre with very, very even tread, and you run it as lower pressure as you can because you really want to get full contact. Whereas when it's muddy, you actually want a grippy tyre, and the grippy tyre holds a little bit of the middle of your tread off the ground, and so you actually don't need that when it's icy. Going to watch another.
Yeah, Van Empel just paddling slightly there.
She seems to be struggling a little with her gears today, with her gear choices. Yeah, so you wouldn't necessarily want a mud because that might not be good on the frozen section. So maybe an intermediate, maybe something that doesn't have quite the sidewall grip, but will be good on most of the course is what you would end up doing today. And low pressure would be fine in these course conditions.
So Van Empel chasing down Puck Petersen in front of her. There is a visual on the gap as they head over the boards for the first time. Puck opts the bunny hop both. Not a problem. But Van Empel, fantastic on her feet, off the bike, virtually no difference in time whatsoever there. Behind them, Denise Betsema continues to chase on. She's had a couple of knee issues this year, Betsema, but going well here today. And then there's a trio behind them led by Blanka Vas, national champion of Hungary.
Yeah, interestingly, Vas has made her way back up through the field to get to that point. We didn't really see her in the beginning. She was actually behind Van Empel on the start line, and so she would have been affected more by the fact that Van Empel went backwards in the pack. It would have been much trickier for her to come forward quicker. But now she's back in that little group that are currently in third spot.
Yeah, big talent, Blanka Vas. We've seen her in the mountain bike at times, on the mountain bike at times as well. Glen Tresforest UCI World Championships earlier in the year. She got a top 5 there. As they cross the end of the first lap, then it's Puck Petersen from Van Empel. 8 seconds the difference. Absolutely nothing in cyclocross terms.
No, particularly on course conditions like this where you can make a slip really, really easily. We've seen on the first lap that nobody's actually put together a perfect lap. Even Puck has crashed into the barrier on one of the descents. So it's, yeah, anything can happen in these race conditions, and 8 seconds is not a lot on a fast course.
There's Sanne Kamp, national champion of Belgium. Oh, Puck Petersen just losing the front end and gathering it back up again in a heartbeat there. In the wrong gear now for this climb, but absolutely superb crisis management from the young Dutchwoman.
And that's what I mean when I say you can make one tiny mistake and you can lose a couple of seconds, and then the rider behind is immediately back on. And you can see there that Puck's decided she's not quite got the line right on that corner. She wasn't able to ride it last lap either. And when you make one mistake, you quite often make 2, 3, 4 mistakes together, and then that time gap is just completely closed, and Van Empel is right back on her again.
Yeah, so nearly an absolutely huge crash. Let's see it again. Just washes the front end. That Canyon not liking the direction change requested off it, but Petersen gathers it back up again. They head back up the climb now, and they are closer together again. So, yep, frozen conditions here in Boom, making this track a bit of a lottery on the way round. And is that something, Helen, as well, they'll be trying to learn and adapt their line choice throughout the race and just kind of nail in where they want to be at all times?
They're trying to push the boundaries of what their bike and them are capable of doing, and so they're maybe sometimes when you've got lots of little top mud, it actually picks up a fine layer and it layers it onto the concrete, and that's when it starts to get a bit slippy if you turn too soon. But Fem carried more speed than Puck, so I think Puck just took a slightly too tight a line. In cyclocross, we quite often take really wide lines that people are like, why are they doing that? It's shorter a different way. But it's all about maintaining your speed. And this is a perfect example. Fem went all the way around the outside there, and she overtakes Puck while freewheeling because she's able to take that really wide line. And Puck has chosen tighter to the corner line, which is much more, I would describe as a mountain biking line, whereas in cyclocross we like to take really long ways to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, Fem Van Empel must have had a direct link to your commentary there. She heard and demonstrated that one absolutely perfectly, right round the outside of Puck Peterson in the lead of this race for the first time. Here are the chasing four behind them, but out front it's all about these two for the time being. Fem Van Empel, one of only two women to have won a Telenet Superprestige race this season so far. Puck Peterson chasing down her first Superprestige win of the season.
We've seen a lot of Puck since she's been back racing cross. She goes really hard for the first few laps, and then she's able to last longer now, but in the first race she struggled a bit after the third lap. So I think Fem is also watching these races. She's also seeing the skill. She's also watching what her competition are doing, so she can learn and grow as a rider. And so she would have seen that, and she's probably she looks very calm and collected, and she's probably just biding her time until she gets to the point where she thinks Puck will struggle a little more, and at that point then she can come around to the front and really apply the pressure.
Yeah, Puck Peterson just opting to stay on the bike there, machine her way up to the top of that really steep little punch. Fem Van Empel off the bike and running. Again, not much to choose between the two of them on lap 2 here in Boom.
And in cyclocross you have a minimum speed, so...
Puck Peterson goes down, just loses the front end round that left-hander. Peterson down, Fem Van Empel disappearing up the road now. Puck Peterson needs to get back on and get after her.
Yeah, you could see she was struggling a little bit going down that hill there. She was, even before that corner, something wasn't quite right. So potentially she'd picked a wrong line that she's not used to taking, or she was taking a bit too much of a risk or something. And then, yeah, straight into that barrier and having to run. And Fem Van Empel was just waiting for her to make a mistake. We're going to get to watch it again.
Here we go, Helen, talk us through it.
Yeah, so she's actually gone slightly off. There's a couple of little ruts there. She's actually gone slightly off, and she's gone into the slicker area of the ground, which... I mean, this line of Fem Van Empel right now, to me, looks like it could get more and more tricky during the race. But you can see where the ground underneath them looks super smooth, and that's when it's really, really slidey. That's when people have used their brakes there, and so the tyre has made it almost like a skid and things like that. And it just gets more and more tricky during the race. So Fem's actually finding lines where people aren't using them, whereas Puck is quite often using... because Puck's skills are incredible, so she's quite often just using the common line because it is technically faster, but as soon as something changes, that's when you start making crashes.
Well, Fem Van Empel leads the way, just makes the bike swap. Let's have a look at that gap back to Puck Peterson now. Puck also opting to change the bike. It really looks like the second half of that lap is where so much of that moisture is, as you say, crust of ice on top of the ground overnight, and once you start to race on that, just turns to the water.
They're also changing so that they can have clean tyres. If you use a more intermediate tread, that actually holds the mud a bit more, because there's not as much gap between the little knobbly bits. That's a technical term. There's not as much space, and so therefore the mud doesn't flick off as much, so you actually need to change because of the tyres, not necessarily because the bike's got a lot of mud on.
And the Betsema group behind them still welded together, 4 riders involved in that tussle for third. And there's Alicia Frank just going through the picture now as Puck Peterson pops the boards again, takes that sort of diagonal line over them to set herself up for that next turn. Reverse. Fast,
yeah,
they're hiding Betsema.
This little group of 4 will probably, as you get to this point in the season, you know that the riders have a established who's really strong at this point in time, and everybody knows that Fem Van Empel is the out-and-out favourite. She's the one that you want to beat. Poke Peters comes back in, and historically she's able to stay with her and create really fast group racing between those two. But this year she hasn't quite got that back again because she had a really long mountain bike season. And after that, the next riders know, okay, I've got another race tomorrow, it's a World Cup. We're not going to be able to come back to Fem or Puck, so let's race for this 4th place. Now, how do I beat these 3 people around me into winning this, into getting that 3rd podium spot?
Fem Van Empel looking ominous here. That gap, 20 seconds now already. She put 3 seconds into Puck Peterson in the last split of lap 2 as they head out onto lap 3 now. Yep, UCI World Cup racing tomorrow from Flamanville, some 6 hours west of here in France.
Yeah, and this is that group there. We've got Anne-Marie Worst on the front with Blanca Vass and Denise Betzemer and Inge van der Heijden in there. So 7th spot right now, Christine Majoris. We haven't actually seen this season so far in these televised races, and it's really cool to see her, but she's not Luxembourg champion, so it's very confusing. She's basically owned that jersey for 15 years, and maybe not that long, but you know, she's owned that jersey for so long, and now we see it on Maria Schreiber. But yeah, it's taken me a while to work out who that was.
A bit like Sana Camp with the Belgian national champions jersey as well. It's sort of strange to think of her without it, but here is Fem Van Empel at the front of this race. So she won the opening round of the Superprestige series earlier in the year.
She's taking very smooth lines, very controlled lines. You can see her focus. I mean, she's always looks focused, but you can see the focus is there because you don't want to make a silly mistake and let Puck come back, because that gives her a bit of morale to try and beat you again.
Yeah, they both looked like they were kind of getting caught up in racing each other on those first couple of laps, and some mistakes crept in from both Puck Petersen and Fem Van Empel. But as that gap after that crash from Petersen has extended, Van Empel looks like she's finding her rhythm here. There's Blanca Vass. This group stringing out now. Vass is attacked. Looks like she's trying to blow it apart.
And Anne-Marie Worst there, she's actually just been on a training camp in Spain, and it's really tricky this year to fit in training during the season, but it's really, really important to do that because you lose your endurance base and you need to increase that, and you need to be able to go out and train harder in order to be good at the World Championships and the end of the season. And it doesn't seem to have made that much difference to her. Normally it takes a couple of races to get back in, but I think this kind of course conditions really suits her, and it wouldn't surprise me if she was in 3rd spot at the end of the race.
Yep, heading into, of course, the busy time of the year for cyclocross racers over the festive period. Back-to-back racing, 10 or 12 days. And this is really kind of, as a cross racer, where, Helen, you want to hit your peak around this time of the season, don't you? Heading into that busy schedule.
You want to. It depends on what your goals are. If you want to win the World Championships, then it would be tough to peak now. And well, I guess it's only 2 months, but yeah, it would be tough. But at the same time, the Christmas block is crazy, like you say, and that's where all the series races are as well. And so if your target is to win a series where there's 40,000 euros to win a World Cup series, 30,000 euros for a Super Prestige and an XTO trophy, I mean, that's not money to be sniffed at. And so, you know, it's important that you focus, and then you've won that series as well, and that's always on your palmares.
Yep, all to play for at this time of year in cyclocross. Incidentally, if you are seeing some slightly more obscure sculptures and stands around the track here in Boom, it is also home to one of Europe's biggest dance music festivals, Tomorrowland, since 2005. So well used to some rowdy scenes over the years.
Yeah, definitely. You can actually see there where Puck just jumped off that the the little ruts that you're seeing are actually quite frozen still in places like this, and they don't move in the same way that a muddy rut moves. Normally it would just you'd just squidge out of it, but you can actually see the back wheels bouncing when she jumps off, and it as she's initially running up these hills. So I think the transition between the ice and the muddier parts and the slick parts is actually really tricky for the riders today to work it out, because that will be changing during their race still.
Yeah, really, really awkward one to pin down here, this track in Boom. It's freezing conditions overnight. Sunlight today, but not on every single part of the course. Most of it lurking in shade, as demonstrated by this shot. You can see the transition from recently defrosted ground to probably still quite frosty conditions around that right-hand corner, just making it really, really difficult for the riders to kind of pin down, as I say, get the measure off.
You can actually see how they're using their tiptoes there. So they've got studs in their shoes, and they're literally just using the studs to get them up the hill.
Yeah, cross. Oh, it's Blanca Vast, just the back end of that Specialized, trying to rotate round on her, manages to keep it together, but that will have affected her speed up this next bank.
She's trying to use that inside, that little patch of grass with a little bit of frost on. She's trying to use that to get a bit more grip, but it's really tough. If you start turning too sharp on icy conditions, you're really going to struggle to actually stay upright, basically, because your wheel's just going to slide out.
You can see the centre of the track there, just absolutely destroyed. Super, super soft as the riders come through. They're coming back together, this little group now.
Yeah, they are. That section of the course is the section that is where you would want mud tyres, but you can't choose a tyre tread based on 100 metres. You have to choose a tyre choice based on the other 2.5 kilometres of the course. And that's where normally they'd just blast through that on a mud tyre.
Van Empel down on the hoods. Getting herself across the line. Let's see what that gap will say. Back to Puck Petersen in second place, who really hasn't come up with an answer for the pace of Van Empel. Petersen and Van Empel were locked together earlier in the race, only for the Alpecin de Koenig rider to have a crash, and Van Empel really has capitalised on it and hasn't looked behind her since.
Yeah, she's really opened up the gap now, and for Peters, that's pretty much race over. We're up to, it's going to be what, 43, 44 seconds as she crosses the line, and
massive lap from Van Empel.
That is a huge gap halfway through a race. There's really not much opportunity for you to be able to come back from that. And so I think Van Empel's won this race, and Puck, knowing that tomorrow is a World Cup, that there's another opportunity to try and win a race, you're just going to be more calm, do the right thing, secure your second spot, but not necessarily put everything in to try and win that race, because 43 seconds is a huge gap. And in a Super Prestige, there's only 1 point between first and second, so you could completely destroy yourself, not have a strong race at the World Cup tomorrow, and you still don't gain an extra point. So for her, it's more about conservation.
Yeah, Puck Petersen missed a good chunk of racing at the start of this cyclocross season, as we see Christine Majerou come to the front of that group.
And at the back of there, we just saw Sharon Van Amrooy come across the line, and I actually had her down for one of the favourites for today's race. Yeah, she's been away and has only just come back to cross, but even so, she normally drops into the season with a lot more speed, and she was on a front row start. She didn't have an issue at the start from what we saw, so I'm not sure if this kind of thing is very cyclocross skills, because of the way that you have to ride the corners, how we're seeing Fem at the front demonstrate to us how beautifully she's taking these lines, and she's not making mistakes. Now she's into the fourth lap, you know, she's got all her lines dialed, and we can see that cyclocross requires that kind of level of commitment and practice, and whereas if you've been away, to come back in, your skills are really rusty, and they can take quite a few races to get back to the top level that you're capable of.
Yeah, she's looking super comfortable out there, Van Empel, isn't she? She's nailed her lines now. She knows where she needs to be, and she's just tapping on the speed.
You can see here she's picking her line choice as to where she wants to go. She's looking to the next corner, because in cyclocross there's no point looking down. If you do, you end up riding into things. You actually need to look, even when you're in the middle of doing an obstacle, you actually need to look to where the next one is, because that's where your body needs to go next. And so it's actually quite a skill to be able to look around a corner, to be able to look to the next obstacle, to be able to do things, because it comes so quickly. You have to think about your gears, you have to think about where you're braking, you have to think about where you're exiting the corner, but you also have to think about how you're going to get into the corner to maintain that speed to exit at. Like Fem Van Empel there, accelerating as soon as she's at the bottom of the descent, and she's still applying as much pressure as she was in the previous laps. It's just that she's 4 to 5 seconds behind now.
Yep, the bike goes where the eyes are looking, and it's all pretty straightforward until, as we just see Fem Van Empel hang a leg off to try and get some grip on the inside of those tyres. Yeah, it's all pretty straightforward until, as I say, you lose grip all of a sudden and concentration's broken. But Van Empel looking absolutely superb here. She did miss a bit of racing, as I say, at the start of the season as well, just to have a bit of a rest, and it looks like it's paying dividends, as did the woman in second place, Puck Petersen, after a hectic summer on the road with the UCI Mountain Bike World Cup, taking double titles in that competition. Puck Petersen, she was a revelation really all season long, and gained herself not just a lot of international fans, Helen, but also she was really welcomed in by that pack of elite women as well, and she earned a lot of fans amongst their competitors as well, which I think speaks volumes about her.
She has a brilliant personality. She's very friendly, lively, outgoing. She does brilliant pre-race videos. So yeah, she's a really, really nice person.
Yeah, it sounds cliched, and I've said it before to say it, but she just really loves racing her bike. She really loves being on her bike. She loves being at a bike race, and it just kind of radiates off her whenever you're near her. You know, she's got a real excitement for it.
And that's real. That's very real. I remember when she first started racing at elite level, and yeah, the things that she could do on a bike were quite incredible. But even at 16 years of age, but she just has a very lively. I mean, everyone's friendly in cross from what I can remember. Maybe your memory changes, but as far as I can remember, everyone was pretty friendly in cross.
Yeah, everyone's out there suffering at the same time, but Fem Van Empel here today looking absolutely superb. She's in the lead ahead of this woman, Puck Petersen, who's in second by a decent margin as well. Just hangs a leg off there, fights to get her weight over the front axle of that canyon. Try and get some kind of grip from the front wheel as she heads into that mud section.
It's actually getting muddier, as we can see, per lap now. Those ruts are getting quite sloppy in the middle, so you actually need more grip, and you might need to adjust your line slightly so that you can either take more speed into it, so you carry more out, or maybe even avoid that section altogether, because it's looking quite sloppy in the middle.
Yeah, there's Vorst.
And this is that battle that we've anticipated with Worst and Blanca Vass. And Vass is actually riding more sections than Worst is riding right now. I haven't really seen anyone else ride these corners, but Worst seems to have the lead in terms of picking the line. So when you're leading the front of a group in cyclocross, you actually get to choose the best lines, and the person behind you has to either adapt and use your lines or slow down a bit and gap it so that they can use their lines. You can see Shirin Van Anrooy now has just come around Lucy Frank there and is moving closer towards the front of the race.
Yeah, the battles forming throughout this one. Let's just have a look at a replay. Super wide line versus the inside, and
that was Shirin Van Anrooy there. Just a little
Van Anrooy down, just takes a second.
Her front wheel slid a little.
Looks like it just found a patch of ice or something, yeah. which, let's face it, it's cold enough out there today that that's a distinct possibility. She is here, the sole representative for the Balwaza Trek Lions. Lucinda Brand not taking this one on. Lucinda Brand having a great season so far on the crossbike.
Once you have an accident like that, if you're really, really close to the pit and you're going to change bikes anyway and the people around you are changing, it's even if you changed half a lap before, you should change your bike immediately, because you don't know what damage you've done, and sometimes the gears get stuck in I can't remember the name of it's like a mode where they just get stuck and they don't work and things like that, and you really don't want that happening in cyclocross, because gear choices are so important with all these changes in terrain.
Yeah, you can see if you're watching cyclocross for the first time, it's all about just that constant speed, isn't it? Whether you're on foot or pedaling, just maintaining that forward momentum. Gearing so vital in that, as Van Empel continues to be cheered around this course in Boom. There is Anne-Marie Vorst, third place. That gap between Van Empel and Peters at 58 seconds now. 1 minute 45 back to Vorst. Blanca Vass currently in fourth. And there's Inga van der Heijden in fifth, 1 minute 52. So the top five covered by just under 2 minutes.
Which actually is quite large gaps for a course that isn't crazy muddy, is actually reasonably fast. But I think the terrain is much harder. When you're watching on television, you can never quite tell the gradient. But I think it's a lot harder, all this constant climbing on, offs. And the descents, you never get to reduce your heart rate and just relax, because you're not just descending. You're taking quite tight lines. You're thinking about what's coming next. After every descent, there's an uphill. So you never really get the chance to calm. So I think your heart rate's it's always really high in cross, but it's going to be constantly hard in this, which is making the time gaps quite large.
Yeah, Van Empel just adjusting her glasses on the way into that little descent into that right-hander. And as you say, just really sticking to all those wide lines and keeping that momentum going beautifully, Van Empel, today.
Yeah, she's really using her cyclocross skills, and it is a thing that a lot of the newer generation to cyclocross haven't practiced as much. We're going to see another crash here.
Pearson again going for an inside line. It just hasn't really worked out for her there. Hit a big soft patch in the middle of it.
Yeah, she saved that quite well, but it wasn't as fast as it could have been, for sure. But yeah, I mean, these younger riders are coming through. They're the next generation. They're all really, really young, and they don't necessarily they haven't necessarily had to learn certain cyclocross traditional skills, because a lot of courses are now, I mean, you look at Neil, for example, there was lots of ups, downs, runs, crazy off cambers, features that we didn't always have in the past. And so in the past, you had to learn the right line so that you could take the skill at the highest speed possible. And whereas now it's much more about being explosive and getting short uphills and things you need to be really explosive for. And so, but it's really nice to see that Van Empel does know this skill, that she does know how to take beautiful grassy grippy lines, not have to take your foot out too much, like super smooth, and keep her speed through those corners. And yeah, even for a rider that's the best already, she's still growing in the sport.
She's also been fantastic today at just hanging a foot off the inside of the bike on a turn, just keeping the inside edge of those tyres hooked up and gripping without having to brake too much more. As we look further down the field behind the leaders, and there is Fem Van Empel coming into some back markers now, and they dutifully get out of her way.
In cyclocross, we have an 80% rule, and so riders that are more than 80% behind the leader of the race are pulled at a certain point in the race, normally just before the finish line. And so you wouldn't necessarily see riders being lapped very often, but obviously today they didn't quite get their judgment right. The commissaires have to do that.
I would be begging to see that member of staff pulling me off the track if I was out there today, but you can see how beaten up the track is getting in Boom here.
So this is where we saw Puck was going through the middle section, and it was very splashy, and she wasn't having to put go through as fast, and you can see Fem Van Empel there actually took a really nice wide line, again adapted her lines according to the course, and that's kind of what you have to do in these conditions because the ruts are quite frozen.
Bike change for Van Empel, and the race leader in for fresh treads. She's been absolutely superb today. Won the first race of the Superprestige series earlier in the year. Looking like she's going to make it her second today.
Wurst hasn't quite gapped Blanca Vass here. She's really, Vass is not giving up just yet.
Vass hanging in there. Great bike rider. Great bike handling skills, which will pay dividends today. Not much green grass left out there, Helen, as we see Vass go really, really wide. Just have to grab a pole there. That won't have helped her cause.
No,
she's just trying to go around the outside up that bank there, was she?
Yeah, and she has actually ridden a part of this before. We saw her on the previous lap riding part of it, but I think it's just getting slippier and slippier, and you kind of have to commit to either way. You have to commit to running or you have to commit to riding, and as soon as you can't ride, you just have to get off and run, and yeah, you know, in cyclocross we're used to running. It's something that we have to do all the time, so for us it's like, okay, as soon as it's running, but Vass, again, this is one of her first races in the season. I think this is her third pro race this year, so you know, you have to get that mentality, and that can take a few races.
Fem Van Empel just getting word from the commissar there. After this, one to go.
I think that's the man that wants to take them out of the race.
I'm glad he didn't take her out.
Oh, out, Fem. You're out.
Yeah, out you go. On the lap 6 then, no such problems. Fem Van Empel thankfully blasting past the guy looking for the 80%ers. But there's Puck Petersen in second position today. And there's just been some mistakes in there, Helen, hasn't there?
There has, and that's about being rusty in the cross race. But she's not. When you take a break, when it's a longer break, it's much harder to come back to that top fitness, because you only get that very, very top end fitness from racing. And for Puck, she's had an incredible mountain bike season, as you said, and for her, you know, it's going to take weeks and weeks to get that level of fitness that a rider that's been racing since the beginning, and I think she only took actually 2 weekends off racing for after the European champs. So for Fem, she's still got all that top end speed, she's got all that muscle memory, and she's so strong this year. She stepped it up another level from last year for sure.
Yep, Puck Petersen on to the final lap now here at round 5 of the Thailand Superprestige series from Boom. She exploded into the world of cross-country mountain bike racing earlier on this season at the UCI Mountain Bike World Cup in Novo Mesto na Morave in the Czech Republic. Took the win there and then rode her way to both short track and cross-country Olympic titles. Puck Petersen. But today it's been all about this woman, her great rival Fem Van Empel. They were together for the first couple of laps, but Van Empel has lit the blue touch paper and disappeared. Here's a battle for third though. Wurst and Van der Heijden coming good now towards the end of this one.
It's a dangerous position to take Inga van der Heijden into the last lap. She's just she's a secret assassin, you know. She's always can follow a wheel. She's incredibly good at the end in a sprint, and yeah, Wurst has to get rid of her.
Easier said than done. 1 minute 10 seconds as the Dutch dominate the top 5 here. Wurst, Van der Heijden locked together. Then it's Van Alphen and Betsema. And there's Blanca Vass with Sanakant. 2 minutes 23 off this woman, the race leader for Jumbo-Visma.
Still able to get out of the saddle over the top of the climbs, still able to re-accelerate. She's just super strong this year, which is really cool to see.
But she's looked super smooth as well, hasn't she? We've seen Puck sort of some errors come in and trying to force inside lines that haven't worked, and Van Empel's just take laps off and stayed cool and calm and in control.
She really has, and she never actually lets anything, she never shows her emotions when she's racing. She's always looks like she's like it doesn't bother her, which it clearly does, and it must be hard to be able to maintain that. But her race faces should be great in a poker game.
She would, yeah, reminiscent actually of Pauline Ferrand-Prévot as well, very similarly poker faced. You can never really read what's going on, but Fem Van Empel on her way to a victory here today.
I think she knows that Van Empel is probably the best, and tomorrow she has to follow that wheel for as long as possible. At the minute she's taking the races on from the start, which is what she used to do last season, and she's trying to drive a gap, and she's trying to drive a gap between her and the riders like Van Empel in it. And last season that did work on a few occasions, but this season Van Empel is so much stronger that I don't think it's really working out for her. And so I think she probably needs to actually hold the wheel of Fem and let Fem do the driving before she can decide when to lay down that really fast lap. Worst is putting a brilliant effort in here to try and gap Van der Heyden, and Van der Heyden's not letting that gap go that far.
Yeah, she must have heard you. She's doing her best to get rid of Inge van der Heyden behind her, but Van der Heyden looked like, to my eyes anyway, like she just closed that gap down on that last shot. So it's all to play for in third place behind Puck Petersen. She just gets herself clipped back in to the pedals.
In these course conditions you are getting a lot of mud, and as it's not as wet as usual, it's really slidey on that line for her at the minute. Really
chopping up now, that descent, isn't it?
And so quite often getting your feet back in is quite tricky because it's got little tiny bits of ice and little tiny bits of mud, and if there's any tiny stones or anything, and then you have to slam your feet a few times to clear the shoe cleats so that you can get them back into your pedals.
Yeah, never easy. Pedals as well, just filling up with mud and bits of ice and dirt, rock. They all get in there, all make it difficult. Not for this woman today though, Van Empel. Puck Petersen opting not to change a bike on the last lap. Accelerates past the tech zone. Swings left.
Yeah, they're coming close towards the finish now. It's not far to go. I think she probably feels like she's got everything, that the bike's doing fine, so she'll just carry on.
That was the first change of facial expression we've seen this afternoon from Fem Van Empel, a smile and a wave to a fan as she heads round the left-hander and out onto the start-finish straight, takes her hands off the bars, shrugs. That'll do nicely. Fem Van Empel makes it 2 Superprestige wins of the season so far. And wins haven't come much smoother looking than that one this season. Big smiles for Van Empel. Absolutely imperious today, Helen.
Yeah. After that first lap where we saw her make a few mistakes, she obviously thought, okay, regain my composure, start again. And she obviously had confidence in her strength, her power, her ability to outgun those other riders in the race, and just kept calm, which is really impressive to see.
Well, this woman was the best of the rest. It looked for a while like she was weathering the storm on the first couple of laps at Van Empel, the pressure she was putting her under, but a crash from Puck Petersen let the UCI World Champion get up the road ahead of her. But Puck Petersen riding herself into a bit of form right before this hectic period of cyclocross racing. Just a wave to the fans, stops the watch. Puck Petersen home in second place, 1 minute 4 seconds back off Fem Van Empel, her great rival. Robson Phoenix behind them, Marie Worst. She managed to, stay off Inge van der Heyden behind her. Good ride from Worst as well.
Yeah, really strong ride from Worst there, being in a group for so long, and different riders were pushing her, and yet she was still the strongest, and she's going to take that third spot. So, yeah, brilliant ride by Worst.
Yeah, again, just heading into a nice bit of form.
Being second to these two is almost a victory.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, absolutely no shame in it for the cyclocross Reds rider. A smile in the smallest of waves then from Marie Worst. She crosses the line behind her. Inge van der Heijden looked like at times that she had the strength to overtake Worst, but Worst stayed in there, kept swinging. 5th place. Van Alphen, winner last time out here for the cyclocross Reds.
In this racing, historically, hasn't always been part of a series, but it has also been a race that a lot of riders have dropped because of training camps and things like that, and they want to do this time of year. And so last year Van Alphen was probably as good as she is this year, but it was definitely a different field to what we've seen this year.
Fast, home in 7th. Looks strong early doors, but her stock faded slightly as the race wore on. Then it's Kant, Van Anrooy. Van Anrooy had that nasty crash we saw earlier on. Good to see her moving under her own steam. Frank, who started on the front row, comes home in 10th place. Just outgunned today.
Doesn't look happy about that. That's actually her mum just giving her a pat on the back.
One of the officials nearly knocked somebody over there by accident. But at the end of the day, none of them could get near this woman. Fem van Empel shrugs the shoulders. Celebrates another Superprestige win this season.
She actually took a 2-week break.